We are delighted to welcome you back to our training session for this part. In this video, we will be addressing some parts of our overall theme, addressing the dynamics of education in the post-COVID-19 era. And so we'll be looking at active learning in this short video. And so we understand that the dynamics of learning has changed over time, where education has primarily been centered on the one who is a learner. Gone are the days when learning process, teaching and learning, was centered on the teacher. Attention was on the teacher. But in recent decades, the learner has been the object of attention. And that's because he is the most crucial element in the learning, teaching and learning process. Because if he does not get the needed skill that is projected in the syllabus or the curriculum, then learning eventually has not taken place. And so for active learning, it is a learning method where the learner is practically and actively involved in all aspects of the learning process. Yes, it is an interesting learning method where the teacher focuses on the learner. In fact, he looks for opportunities, he looks for learning styles where he could incorporate the learner in every bit of the content delivery. He does not just come to class and post out information on the learner, where the learner can get exactly what he feels like getting, what he's able to get, even putting back that on a test expectation or evaluation model. No, but he learns a skill. The learner gets a problem-solving skill. Critical thinking ability is inculcated by means of this learning method that is known as the active learning method. And so, just like we have said, what does the teacher do in this respect? The teacher guides the learner into achieving the objective of the content that has been outlined. He does so by presenting the content, the objective, the goals, the dynamics, the methods that could be used, and then the analysis. All are done by the learner. And so what that requires is that it is more sophisticated and interesting, simplified than the lecture-based methods. The lecture-based method, obviously, like many institutions of higher learning use, it is a method where the lecturer simply comes to class and pours out information on the learners. They can take what they want and go away with what they cannot get. Sometimes they are expected to do papers, presentations, and they simply do that, expecting that this is at the limit of the class. That means that they do not see this information becoming important to them out of the classroom. And so they forget it as soon as possible, as soon as they have written exams or done term papers. But that is not the same thing with active learning. In active learning, the learner is a participant in the learning process. And so because he is a participant in all the stages of the learning, of the content revelation, of the content description, he comes to be part of it. He learns valuable skills and he can solve problems that have been raised at the beginning of the content description. And then even when he leaves the class, he sees that the information he has acquired is relevant. He has learned valuable skills on problem-solving abilities and critical thinking abilities. Now, there are basic reasons why active learning is more valuable than the lecture method. Now, what are some of the disadvantages of lecture method that, if compared, put that side by side with active learning, the active learning stands a chance? We observe that in the lecture method, there is often poor learner participation. The learner can just sit down and listen or answer a few questions thrown at him and the lecture continues. There is often a lack of interest. And then there is a notion that the information does not apply to me after I leave here. Information is not essential, it's only essential for exams. And so the learner does not relate the content to cite out problems. So active learning method, however, is a structured learning method where the learners are given activities down the line to perform as the content is unveiled. And so participant roles converge at the group objectives, and then each group role converges at the entire objective of the class or the content that is expected to be delivered. So all group objectives solve basic identifiable problems raised at the beginning of the content. So active learning will make adequate use of cooperative learning, within the features that have been described above. So solving problems through critical thinking, activities, and then problem solving abilities. So active learning avoids presentation of too much material that may not be needed at some point. This makes it difficult to point to a unique problem and what approach has been used to solve it. That is lecture method. Now, what are the importance of active or cooperative learning? All the learners are involved in the learning process. No one learner is left behind or dropped as the learning proceeds, because since everybody is a participant, the teacher can observe exactly at what point any of the learners is not moving along with the entire class, and he pauses for a moment and gets that one aligned to the extent the class has gone. In fact, in most cases, it helps other learners, the project of other learners are doing in the class or activities. It helps the one who lags behind to move along with the class. Now, the teacher also keeps track of all the students, like we have said. And then we also have learners learn from other learners. There is also increased retention. There is also increased retention because all the learners are participants in the activity. And because they are personally involved in the activities that are going on, they retain information that has been presented in the content. Of course, we have seen that since the learners are all involved in the activities leading up to the content description, analysis, critical thinking, and problem solving, they will remember all they did personally and the conclusions that they arrive at. Another advantage is that active learning methods are easy to apply. We do not look for them because it is a project where everybody has to be involved. They are easily accessible. But one important thing is that the teacher has to prepare and plan this content. He has to plan the activities for each individual. He has to plan the activities for each group, and he has to plan how these activities will converge at the goals of the content. In fact, what he will have to determine is the procedures for these activities to take place in class. And at the end of this, he would have achieved the content objective or the goals. So the methods here employed in active learning or cooperative learning are not vague. They are practical and easy to apply. All the learners develop critical thinking and problem-solving abilities. And then there is also greater emphasis placed on the learner exploration of information. Of course, you can see that from this explanation of active learning and what it involves, it becomes handy and most practical in the classroom when teachers adapt and use the skills or techniques that are associated with active learning. But what will active and cooperative learning involve? It will involve planning. That we have said earlier. Planning the content of activity is important. You have to plan the content of activity, the learner's role, the group rules, the observations that could be made, and also what results could be achievable. Also, clear goals would be spelled out. Techniques will be employed, and then at the end of the day, the conclusion that will be reached will also be clearly put in focus. The students will have to be intimated of the possible results that are expected from their job, from their unique roles. And so it is important that learning adopt, or teachers adopt, active learning procedures, techniques, as that is very, very essential. What have we said so far? We have identified that active learning, as opposed to lecture-based methods, is more advantageous. It involves the learner. It makes the learner a practical part of the learning process. And because of that, he understands every stage of the learning process because he was involved, of the content explanation because he was involved. He thought through it, he participated in it. And so the conclusion that arrive at, he agrees with it and he knows them. And so he can exemplify them outside. He can use the qualities or the skills that may have been cultivated in the exercises leading up to the conclusion at a class or out of class to solve problems that he will meet in connection with what the content that he has been taught. So in the meantime, we would like you teachers to take this activity. The activity says, distinguish between active learning and lecture-based method. That is the first one. What method would you employ to facilitate active learning, and how can you ensure learners' supervision? Drop your comments on the platform and we will get back to you. Thank you so much for listening to this. I remain Mr. Adi Whiteroom of Prime Model Academy.